All right, so what is mobility on demand in T-Best? What T-Best can do within an existing or potential MOD zone? We have fixed route service analysis. We've looked at that. Parcel trip generation, which is the demand inside of MOD zones. We have that. We've looked at that extensively. Summarize the demographics. We can look at first mile, last mile analysis from transit stops, MOD fixed and route gap analysis. So where do fixed routes and MODs collide? Where are the gaps where MOD would be served those areas where fixed route does not? So what T-Best cannot do yet is estimate mobility on demand ridership or operational characteristics in terms of number of vehicles and cost. All right, so here's just an example of mobility on demand type of analysis in T-Best where you're looking for service gaps for MOD. So you would create a walk shed from stops using the actual sidewalk network, so our walk sheds. Use the mobility area erase feature to overlay walk, bike, and wheelchair sheds. So essentially you're taking this MOD zone, so zone 1, and you're subtracting the fixed route walk shed from it to come up with this gaps in it. So you can see where we've erased these areas from this zone where we have walk access to fixed route transit. So then we are just showing the gaps and not the full MOD zone. So what you wind up with market analysis where you can show the mobility on demand gaps, in this case, 0 vehicle households. You can also use your land use parcel analysis to mobility on demand gaps for trip generation. So here are the trips being generated out of community shopping centers and different land use types within the gaps, the gap areas. So very useful for saying, here's the areas where we have the trips and the densities that we want to evaluate. All right, so another type of use for this, for mobility on demand, is to analyze linkages to first mile and last mile for transit service. So in this case, we would create a drive shed with the desired mobility on demand coverage. So example would be like a 10-minute drive shed from the end of a line of a transit station. So again, we're going to use our erase tool to where we're going to subtract those stops that are along that are covered by the transit networks in the drive shed. So basically, you can see where the drive shed extends up here and over here to over these stops, right? So there's no stops over in this area. So essentially what we want to do is select those stops using the drive shed and create a walk shed around them, and then subtract that walk shed from the drive shed to come up with just the areas that are served by driving, right? So it is a way of saying, well, we're not really serving these areas that are already served by transit. We want to subtract those out to come up with just the drive shed from the end of the line. Okay, so we have one more exercise to do. It's the mobility on demand analysis. And so let's just go ahead and run through that. All right, any questions? No. All right, so open the TDP 2030. I'm on section 10.4, mobility on demand analysis. I'm a little tired here. Mobility on demand gap analysis. Open the TDP 2035 constrained plan scenario. So I will close the fall 2024 balancing and go to my constrained plan. All right, so I'm going to double click on that to open it and add the MOD Zone 3 mobility area to the map. So I'm going to drill into my mobility areas, MOD Zone 3, double click on that, adds it to the map. All right, so use the mobility areas toolbar, refresh selection with mobility area tool to select the stops which intersect MOD zone 3. So I can use this to select the stops. Oops, stops. All right, so that shows all stops and selects those stops that intersect with that MOD zones. So from there, we want to use our toolbar to create a 1/4 mile walk shed around the selected stops. So we're going to switch this to walk shed, and we are going to generate a market shed from the selected stops. All right, so that's what it looks like. And we're going to save this shed, and we're going to call it MOD Zone 3 walk shed. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and clear our selections. Let's go to stops and clear that. And on to the next. So use the mobility area erase tool to remove the MOD Zone 3 walk shed from the MOD Zone 3. To do this, in the TBEST Explorer, right-click on MOD Zone 3. So let's go to MOD Zone 3 and right-click on it and go to Erase from Mobility Area. All right. So in the Mobility Area Selection dialog, select MOD Zone 3 walk shed. So here's our MOD Zone 3 walk shed right here. And we just want to select Erase Area. It's going to create a new mobility area from this. So we'll call it MOD Zone 3 Service Gap. All right, so it was successfully erased. So we have this service gap analysis. So you can see where all of our paths were for our transit routes and our walk sheds are erased. So you can see where the gaps are now in our MOD Zone 3. All right, use the mobility area socioeconomic and land use analysis tools to determine the markets within the service mobility gap. So quickly, we can just go to our socioeconomic summary and determine that there are 8,000 people in the gaps. There is 1,371 jobs. If we want to run the market analysis, it looks something like this. Of course, in here, we can switch up to say, well, what is our minority population? Whatever type of demographic we might want to be targeting with our service, we can certainly do that here and evaluate it. Okay, next, let's look at the land use. All right, 103 total person trips, no hotels, limited shopping, a lot of residential, 42% of the total, 54% of the trips are schools. So a lot of school trips in here, looks like. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, so we have several schools that are falling within the boundary. So we can see where those are located relative to where we might want to place our service as well. And of course, we can switch this up to show any kind of land use grouping. Here's all the land use groups and the total person trips in it. All right, here's the residential, mostly single family. All right, so that is the way that we would kind of evaluate mobility on demand in terms of its relationship to fixed route, so that we can determine markets that aren't served by fixed route that are within the actual mobility on demand zone. So that's one example of it.